So welcome to this session. This is a new webinar series called How to Future-Proof Your Brand. I'm Neil Wilkins, and if you've been on to any of the recent webinars that I've been hosting, you'll be very pleased to hear that this series is not all about me. And actually, I am just literally the host and compere and facilitator for what I'm hoping are going to be three really immersive and intriguing webinars that we have running back to back over the next couple of weeks, and plus obviously today. So this is a really pertinent, poignant and timely topic, how to future-proof your brand. And I'm going to just give a little bit of an introduction as to really why we're here and some of the thinking behind why this is the moment to really be broaching this topic. And I will be joined through these three webinars with a very sort of illustrious, if you like, illustrious group of people who are highly experienced in the topics that we're going to be covering. So the overall kind of driving kind of theme, I guess, for these three webinars, which are on the 7th, obviously here today, the 14th and the 21st, are kind of really underpinned, if you like, for how to future-proof your brand. And we're going to be looking at some definitions here in terms of what we mean by sustainability, sustainability in marketing, marketing sustainability. These are kind of phrases that are really being used interchangeably. So we're going to do some deep dives into kind of actually what they mean and how we can actually really come to terms with them and see whether there's a mix here that can actually help us within our own businesses and organizations. So today is all about embracing sustainability, kind of figuring out actually what it is, because there's a lot of people talking a lot of different narratives. So what we want to do is actually provide you with some real clarity and direction so that you can actually start to kind of figure out some of the steps that you might want to take yourselves. Next session, this time next week, we're going to look at how to avoid greenwashing, because one of the big challenges that you have once you get onto this journey is the fact that people are very skeptical. I'm going to be having a conversation with Joe Pereira shortly, a little bit later in this session, and he is very passionate about anti-greenwashing. He's very much about sort of doing this authentically and with real true purpose and honesty and integrity, because it's all about evidence. And we'll be talking about how you find and delve deeply to find the evidence as you go through this journey yourself. So you'll be able to avoid being challenged really and being accused of greenwashing. And then on the 21st, we're going to look at how to build from all of these things, all of these elements and ingredients, how to build a sustainable brand. Okay, so brand sustainability within this whole kind of sustainable marketing piece is pretty much the outcome that I guess we're all kind of seeking. So why are we doing this? Why we're actually here? Well, this is very timely, as I say, because there's a number of different things that we have found almost sort of reaching a perfect storm. And I've used this phrase, I've found a lot over the last 18 months. It's felt that we've kind of been moving towards a perfect storm. And it's just really interesting how it just feels that now in these times of chaos, these times of a lot of businesses pivoting, it's now time really for us potentially to really be embracing it rather than just paying lip service to it or just really watching it. So now is the time to engage. So the Marketing College, of which I'm a fellow and tutor, so sort of actively engaged within the college. The college is now kind of feeling it's potentially the right time to look at introducing a new practitioner's apprenticeship within the sustainability realm. So we'll be talking about that as we go through these sessions, and that will be something that we'll be able to provide you with more details around later this year. So there's a real kind of commitment from the college to kind of driving this whole agenda narrative and a real kind of practicality to it, driving it into 2022 and beyond. The other kind of half of the mix really here is that these three webinars are in association with the Mindful Collective, and you can find a lot more detail about Mindful Collective if you go to mindfulcollective.net. Mindful Collective is a not-for-profit organisation. It's a community interest company that was set up to help facilitate this agenda, if you like, and there's a lot of opportunity there to engage, to sort of spot and maybe even contribute your own good case studies and examples where you see sustainability. The whole kind of reinvention of the marketing mix is in there as well. And also a really key theme, which I know Nigel's going to touch on in his presentation shortly, is the whole idea of working to a higher purpose. So actually being really authentic in the marketing activities that you do. So loads more kind of examples and sort of case studies and sort of theories and tools and models, if you like, at mindfulcollective.net. So I would certainly encourage you to go, if you haven't already, go and have a little look over there. So just want to give you a little background as to what to expect really from these 3 webinars. So the first one, the one that we're here today, we are very fortunate to be able to welcome Nigel Clark, who I'm going to be sort of introducing a little bit more formally in a moment, to introduce us to the whole concept of marketing sustainability. Now, Nigel is a sustainable branding specialist, works extensively through professional services organisations and right across those sectors. He's also college course leader, so he knows his stuff. So we should be able to expect, you know, some really, really interesting perspectives to really kind of set the scene here for what the opportunity is and what the potential is, because a lot of people are talking about this, but actually the thing to me that's missing is the, okay, so how do I do this thing? How do I engage? How do I do something to take those next steps? So Nigel's going to introduce us to the concept of marketing sustainability to begin us on our journey. Then we're going to have a conversation with Joe Pereira, who's, like me, co-founder of the Mindful Collective. There's a small group of us who are sort of initially kind of sort of setting this thing up with the idea that we're then passing it over to the world to kind of co-facilitate and co-collaborate on creating really, really strong assets and materials within the Mindful Collective. So it's a very much a collaborative space. It's not about us, it's about the whole wider community. So Joe and I are going to have a conversation about kind of our experience in the whole marketing sustainability debate to this point, explore some of the challenges really that we and others who have tried to push this agenda forward have faced. And I'm sure if you're already on this journey, you will be able to resonate with some of the things that we found as challenges. But fortunately, and Joe is going to share some of these ideas with us, we think now we have seen the wood from the trees, to kind of, that's a very British phrase here. We've kind of seen a way forward that we think is actually going to be able to foster a pathway and a journey, if you like, or a map that will take businesses and organizations, should they wish to, into the future. So we think we've got something that we can share with you that is going to be hugely powerful if you choose to join us on this journey. Then in the second of the 3 webinars, we're going to do a slightly different approach here. We're going to actually approach this with a balance between a panel discussion. Nigel will join us again, Joe will join us again, and we'll be welcoming Brendan Llewellyn, who is a consultant at the Mindful Collective, hugely experienced in the whole sustainability and higher purpose and sort of senior kind of strategic strategy building angle. He is director of Advisor Home, and again from a very sort of professional services and the financial sector perspective, he will be sharing some really interesting case studies and examples along with Nigel and Joe, and we will be having a panel discussion. So it won't be based around lots of presentation, it will be very much a conversation. And the really nice thing for me facilitating this and hosting it is that I know these guys have got very different perspectives. So we will be able to see a lot of different angles and experiences really that we can then draw from. And this is a very much a pick and mix approach. Not everything is going to resonate for you. Not everything is going to give you something that you can actually use and kind of work with, but some things will. And this is the beauty of this topic. This is the beauty of the kind of the journey that we're all on, is that some things will be really kind of useful to you and other things will be just nice to kind of park for now. And of course, the skill that you're going to be doing is trying to kind of figure out which is which. And that brings us to then the third of the webinars, which will then hopefully take us through to almost the conclusion, which is about what are those next steps. So we will have a presentation on sustainable branding from Nigel. And we will be in conversation with Charles Nixon, founder of Cambridge Marketing College, who has a wealth of experience from a wide range of different industries. And Charles will come at this from a sort of an economics kind of background, as well as from a marketing background. So we will be able to kind of explore with Charles some of the economic and the business and financial impacts of what is just a lovely thing to do. So we're trying to here kind of put some sort of commercial sensitivities around a pure marketing communications agenda. So by the end of these 3 webinars, hopefully you will have something that's quite commercially sensitive, as well as something that's quite marketing sensitive. Because for me, that is a really important balance. And that is something I'm going to explore with Joe in a little while. So the first thing I would like to do before I introduce you to Nigel, and we hear from Nigel with his short but very informative presentation, I'd like to invite you to take part in a very short little poll. And Lauren's going to put up onto the screen in just a moment a poll that we would like to invite you to contribute to. And this is about kind of really sort of setting the scene as to where you are in this whole marketing sustainability piece. This is all about kind of asking you really where you think you are as an organization in terms of your, I guess, involvement, your ability to kind of drive or lead marketing or sustainability within your organization. And the question that really we're posing to you here is, are you able to drive this from a marketing perspective within your organization? So do you as marketing drive the organization forward in the whole marketing sustainability piece? Do you kind of sort of sit on the fence with it, or do you take no part and are completely reactive? And do you feel that that is an appropriate thing to do? How important, and this is really the question, how important is it that marketing is able to lead the whole debate? How important is it that marketing leads sustainability within your organization? So Lauren, if you're able to share the poll, we will see what people feel within their organization right now, how they are able to kind of lead this debate in their business. So the question is here, and these questions are answered anonymously. So we are not able to see who answered what, but we will get a really interesting little perspective here. How important we feel collectively here it is that marketing leads the sustainability debate in a business. And you can only make one choice. So either you feel it's very important that marketing leads this, slightly important, not very important, or unimportant. And when you've submitted your answer, Lauren has seen that we have enough votes in the pot, then she will share with us the answer, and that'd be very interesting to see what we collectively feel in terms of the importance. So it might be that your organization has somebody who is already tasked with owning sustainability in its broadest sense. You might have a team or an individual, in which case you might feel it's not that important that marketing leads it. But if this is early days, you might think now is the time, we have to be really driving this forward. So yeah, what do you think? How important is it that marketing leads the sustainability debate in a business? And you can talk from your business's perspective. So Lauren has now all of those in, and this is the answer. So 72% of those who voted say that it is very important that marketing leads sustainability debate within a business. And I guess you're answering predominantly from your own business. 21% feel that it is slightly important. So I'm guessing there that you're saying, okay, it's important, we're part of the debate, but there's probably others involved in it as well. And 7% say it's not very important. So that's interesting. So we've got 93% of people say it's slightly or very important, 7% of people saying it's not very important that it's marketing. Now that could, of course, we need to interpret this. It could be that because you're not actually in marketing, so you're here and you're feeling, actually it's down to me to do it, but I don't actually work in marketing. So you might be here from HR or from finance or from operations or sales, in which case you might feel that it's your responsibility. So welcome. If you're not from marketing, you're very welcome, obviously, here as well. It's not just for marketers. But 0 people say it's unimportant. So we have a commitment here from the audience to say that the vast, significant majority feel that it's important that marketing leads the sustainability debate in a business. So that leads us pretty much seamlessly into our first session, if you like, within this particular webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to the very capable hands and the voice and face of Nigel Clark, who is going to talk us through really an introduction to marketing sustainability. So over to you, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Neil. And that poll result comes at somewhat as a relief, I would say. Otherwise, if it was the other way around, I might have as well go home now. But thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome everybody. And thank you for giving us your time today, as Neil has outlined. I'm going to kick off this session with very much a perspective on sustainable marketing. And I'm going to ask the initial question, which is, does sustainable marketing make any sense? Is it an oxymoron? Many people would kind of go, those are two words that really do not go together, sustainability and marketing. And the reason why they might think they don't go together is I put up there a couple of definitions or acknowledged definitions. One is the UN's long-held, this goes back a couple of decades now, I think, definition of sustainable development. So development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And then the well-known, and I'm sure those of you who have studied marketing will be familiar with the Chartered Institute of Marketing's definition of marketing, as marketing is the management process responsible for identifying, anticipating and satisfying customer requirements profitably. I put up an anonymous one, which I've kind of written myself, which is marketing's job is to sell more stuff, or more to the point that that's often what we're seen to be doing, selling more stuff, and sometimes selling more stuff that people don't need. So it seems rather uncomfortable to sit on one side with the UN talking about meeting needs of the present, but also thinking about future generations, not just thinking about customers, thinking about whole generations to meet their own needs. And then marketing's definition, which very much feels in the moment. It feels like what people need or what we can identify they need. So they might not even know they need it. And we're just talking about customers. So do those two things sit comfortably together? And sorry, I'm just moving my screen on. So what often we find also is that marketers come at sustainability and say, well, this is very complex. It's a very complex subject. Where do we start? They also repeat that point, which I kind of put in my anonymous definition, which isn't really just marketing about selling more stuff, and how does that fit with sustainability? And then this fear that we're going to tackle more in the second webinar, which is, are we just greenwashing? Are we just sort of cooking something up that is going to get us into more trouble? Are we better off just hiding away from this subject? So there are three kind of quite defensive questions that I often hear. Complexity. Is this really our job? Is this, does this even sit with what we're doing? And are we just going to get hung out to dry if we try and do anything on this job, on this agenda? You then get into I find more positive types of questions, which is the one around, well, will customers pay for sustainability? Sustainability is seen as expensive, or it's seen as premium. So how do I understand sustainability? Will customers pay for it? And then the broader aspect beyond customers of, well, what do stakeholders want? This is, all well and good talking about customers, but what is my broader stakeholder group really looking for? And then you have some really interesting questions that I hear very often in this arena, which is, well, are we already behind the curve? Are our competitors already making something of this, or can we differentiate here? Is this something that we can actually beat our competitors on? And how do we not just appeal to the customers or that we had today, or the customers that we had 5 years ago, but how do we appeal to Gen Z, or the next generation of customers that are coming through? So I hear a lot of questions that are, cautious, but that also more forward-looking. So if we just deal with that first one there around complexity, sustainability is and can be a confusing topic. There's lots of acronyms in there. You will hear about, and we'll clear up a couple of these today, but you'll hear about SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals. ESG is increasingly talked about in the investment community. We have buzzwords or buzz phrases like people, planet, profit, or the triple bottom line. We then have all of the climate language that is being used. People talk about their carbon footprint. They talk about being climate neutral. They talk about net zero. In the bottom right-hand corner there, you hear people now talking about being carbon negative. You hear about the climate emergency, and people get confused. Well, are these all the same thing, or are they slightly different reflections on the same topic? And then beyond the climate emergency, beyond the issues around carbon emissions and greenhouse gases, I didn't even put greenhouse gases on my list here. I think I could have probably created another list twice as long as the one I have here. You have all of the social elements that come through. So people talk about movements that we've seen in the past couple of years: Me Too, Black Lives Matter, human rights. All of these that's part of the sustainability agenda. More established topics like corporate governance, anti-bribery and corruption. A lot of things get thrown in to that sustainability agenda. So again, there is that feeling that, or a reluctance to engage, because they're sort of thinking, well, what is this? And what does it mean to me? What does it mean to my brand? And what does it mean to my organization? So the good news is sustainability can be simplified. And marketers are great communicators. We're great at sort of kind of cutting through and identifying what really matters. So there's lots of things here that can help us. So I mentioned the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals. This is a very well-established framework brought in by the United Nations. Admittedly, there are 17 Sustainability Development Goals, so that's quite a long list, but there's some very good information there that helps you understand what is in this full agenda and how everything intersects. We have got that definition of sustainable development or sustainability that the UN has used for many years, about meeting the needs of the present and also being able to serve the future. And I think that time difference aspect is really important in sustainability. It's not just about today, it is about tomorrow. The ESG framework, if you're involved in finance and investment, is a very good one to understand around environment, social governance. But the one that I like the best and has stood the test of time for me is the 3 Ps of planet, people, and profit. That is the same as the triple bottom line concept. But I think it's very easy for people to understand. It's easy to get your heads around, and it's easy to use in communication terms. So when we say planet, people, and profit, what are we talking about? And we will get more into this in our 3rd session together, when we explain a little bit more about how we should take this on, and particularly how marketers should look at their impacts across the 3 Ps. In marketing, we love a P. We have the 4 Ps, the 7 Ps, the how many Ps you want to create. But this is the 3 Ps of sustainability: planet, people, or profit. Or how I like to think about it, which is environmental balance, social inclusion, and economic equity. So environmental balance, more than just the climate agenda. extending into areas of maybe even local or broader impacts on the natural world. Social inclusion, the whole diversity and inclusion agenda, how you treat and involve people in your organization and your brands. And then economic equity, not only about making profit, but making sure that that profit is fairly shared throughout the different stakeholders and participants in your organization. So planet, people, profit, I think stands for me the test of time. And where I get excited about how marketers can get involved in this agenda, not just communicate the agenda, is the fact that when you're thinking about those 3 Ps, you have to think about the whole life cycle of your organization or your brands, the end-to-end of supply chain within your organization and customer use. Environmental management, many sustainability professionals will tend to focus on that box in the middle. They'll think about what goes on within the boundaries of their organization. They'll think about their own operations. They'll think about their own people. If you're in a manufacturing business, you'll probably be very involved, or you could be very involved in thinking about your supply chain. So procurement, ethics and resources. We've all seen the stories about the fast fashion companies where actually there's not a lot of sustainability impacts within their organization. Everything is coming through the supply chain in terms of how they procure, how they the people that work for them, the people that make their goods. So supply chain has had a lot of attention. But where I think marketers are really valuable in this process is in terms of understanding customer use. There's a lot you will see in the sustainability language around behavior, about what we need to do as customers for a more sustainable world. And so we're people that understand customers. So we need to understand behavior. We need to understand our brand proposition and how that's interpreted. And we can have a big part to play here. So if I give you a very small example, which is washing powder, detergent, laundry liquid, whatever you want to call it. If you're a business in that space, then most of your sustainability impacts, most of your climate impacts are in customer use. It's all about the water. It's all about the temperature that people decide to wash your clothes at. You can optimize your organization. You can optimize your supply chain. But if you want to limit your environmental and climate impacts, you've got to affect customer behavior. And that's where marketers have a huge part to play. So I think there's a big opportunity in that box and a great opportunity for marketers. Where I also get excited about where marketers can play a role in the sustainability agenda is the key skills that we already have. So if I deal with the bottom line first, sustainability, you really need to understand what your impacts are and how to manage them. And as I said, you need to understand that right through your life cycle, your supply chain, and through to customer use. So needs analysis, market research, data and analytics are really important here, cutting through the jargon and really understanding what it means for you. So we're great at that. We really understand these skills and these methods. But if you go to the top line, this is where we really can set ourselves apart. Yes, we're great communicators, and maybe at times marketers have stepped over the line and communicated greenwash rather than really true sustainable messages. But where we need to get to be great sustainability professionals or help our organizations is we need to be involved in change management, stakeholder engagement, customer behavior. And these are all key sustainability skills, but they're also key marketing skills. So just as a wrap up for this first session, I'm going to say, of course, marketers should future-proof their brands. Marketers should marry sustainability and marketing. I'm not sure I like the phrase sustainable marketing together, but sustainability and marketing together have a strong bond. They have some really strong overlaps. And what I would like people to think about in terms of a coming together of both the sustainability and a marketing definition is one where we set out to meet the real needs, not just creative needs, but the real needs of customers and stakeholders today. So broaden our ambition to stakeholders and customers without compromising the ability to meet the real needs of future customers and stakeholders. So we're keeping that time difference in there. We have to think future, we have to think present. It's development will happen. It's not a bad thing. It's going to be important, but we've got to balance the two. And we will come on and explore these things a bit more in future sessions. But what my challenge for marketers today is decide what sustainability means for your brands and organizations. And Neil and Joe will talk in a moment about purpose, about what organizations are about, and where sustainability fits into that sense of purpose. And then if you know what it means for you, you need to understand your impacts and opportunities. Work that out, and we will discuss that more in the third session. And then thirdly, my challenge to everybody is step forward, put your skills to good use. I agree with those 70 to 90% of people that say marketing should be at the front of the queue. We should be at the front of the agenda. And in our following sessions and in the chat with Neil and Joe now, we'll start to explore further what that really means. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Neil.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I mean, talk about packed with information and thought-provoking stuff. And I'm going to use that word stuff in a really positive sense, because the way that Nigel's kind of very eloquently put this is that this is a confusing space, but there is simplicity as a thread that goes through it. And you know, from my perspective, I think the only way that we're going to be able to actually really future-proof our brands is if we can actually cut through that noise, cut through that chaos, and actually figure out what really makes a difference. The final slide that Nigel put up there was really, really pertinent, because the whole thing about defining it from a place of kind of truth and a place of authenticity. Interestingly, Carolina in the chat, whilst Nigel was talking, came up with a comment about actually being, you know, really, really sort of coming from a genuine place. And I really like the idea of, and as she puts, focusing on the problems we can solve for our audiences, but from a more genuine place. And the whole kind of, you know, authentic, transparent and real truth and honesty that comes through in this opportunity, I think is a hugely powerful thing. At the same time, of course, then, as Nigel describes it, if you push that too far, then you start to be challenged. Then you start to sort of have people then maybe being a little bit more skeptical over some of the claims that you make. So therefore, your evidence base needs to be really strong. So there's a whole bunch of things going on here. So what I want to do now is have a conversation with Joe Pereira, who's one of my co-founders in Mindful Collective, because Joe has a number of different perspectives on some of these challenges. And he and I, over the last probably 2.5 years, I think it is now, have been working very, very closely on trying to really understand where this confusion base is coming from. And I think it's a really important thing to kind of really start with, Joe, and I really want to kind of sort of talk this through with you, because I know we've kind of visited this whole confusion thing and sort of confusion, challenges, chaos, definitions. All of these things have been really kind of, you know, changing like the weather. They sort of seem to ebb and flow, and one day, you know, we think it's one thing, and then the next day we start talking about it and it feels like it's something different. It only really feels now when you start talking to somebody like Nigel, who's clearly sort of cut through some of those challenges, that you start to think, actually, there is a clearer definition there. I mean, from your perspective, and Joe, I mean, why do you think marketers to this point really have been so confused and typically have kind of shied away from this whole sustainability thing?
Yeah, well, I think to be honest, companies and organizations in general have shied away, not just marketing as a function. I think that stuff like the SDGs legislation that comes into place into the future is driving an agenda. The latest IPCC report has garnered a lot of attention, which has kind of brought the conversation of sustainability back into mainstream business, as kind of distracted from post-COVID recovery. But in terms of marketing's perspective, I think very much there is, as Nigel said, a real lack of understanding in the space. Marketing education doesn't include anything related to sustainability, and very much the traditional model of marketing is basically based around this sense and respond. What does the marketplace want, regardless of its knowledge of its needs and what's sustainable or not, and how do we then provide that? And that position that Nigel's talking about changing behaviors, which is something we've talked about before, is moving to a model of guiding and co-creating. So working with a wider range of stakeholder groups and changing behaviors within the marketplace to adopt more sustainable practices and sustainable consumption. And so in terms of the education space, that's not really there. And like I said, it's all emerging, it's all new. There are a lot of confusing definitions around. And I think marketers shy away from potentially what they don't understand. And also in terms of marketing's influence within the organization, we've all said marketing sits as the interface between the stakeholders and the company, and it has influence all over the place. But often in reality, some of that isn't actually the case. You see, the lack of board representation when it comes to marketing, the influence that it potentially has within an organization can be quite far reaching, but it can be short, campaign focused, target driven, sales driven as well, which doesn't lead itself to thinking about long-term well-being for everyone, which is really kind of sits at the core of what we mean by sustainability. And so trying to kind of lead the agenda on that topic is what we hope will give marketing more authority within the organization, and also drive long-term value forward as that agenda starts to change, and as legislatively as things push forward where companies have to comply.
I think what you brought into play there, the whole kind of thing that talks about obviously education on the one hand. You've talked about the kind of the tactical day-to-day kind of role that marketers have, which is inevitable. We're here to do marketing, so you can't lose sight of that. But if the education isn't there in terms of the sort of the baseline, as it were, so we've got the tools and the knowledge, and we kind of know where things fit and how they fit. But then also, if one of the other challenges is that we're actually very, very busy, and I use that phrase sort of guidedly, because it's all about choices. We could choose not to do the tactical day-to-day and just completely immerse in this, but then of course there's a consequence. There's a consequence to all of our marketing decisions, both positively and negatively. So we could choose to just do it, but then if everything else then falls down like a pack of cards, then we've got a real problem. So I think I think picking out what you're saying there's choices here, but there's also a balance to strike, isn't there? I mean, if we were to assume that there's a few tools available, there might be some best practice. There is such a thing in terms of case studies that we might be able to emulate in our own businesses. So there might be some stuff in there that we can work to. There's probably a few frameworks, and actually we're going to share one with you if you're listening to this in a moment. So we know there's a framework because we've been working on it. But let's say there's a framework or two there which kind of helps you. But then the people in your organization are saying, yeah, but hold on, you've got to do the social media this morning, and oh, this afternoon, can you deal with that campaign? And oh, by the way, Bob down in the warehouse needs a bit of sort of activity sort of through the email database because he's got some products to shift. It's, to me, there is still a bit of a disconnect between actually what we're tasked with as marketers, irrespective of whether we're senior or junior, and actually this whole new world that we're being almost asked to be part of. We're super busy. So how are we going to do this thing?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, like as we've experienced, does happen from a leadership approach. So that's where we deal with purpose. That's where we deal with the intention to change. But like you said, education, communication, and advocacy, in terms of those three respects, you know, we've been talking about that externally with changing customer behavior, but that still applies to internal marketing as well. And you know, through our work with the Mindful Collective, and certainly like my education within sustainability, business management as well, is becoming advocates of change within your organization. So those, like you've spoken about, those small case studies, those insights in education on the impacts the organization have, it needs to start from a place internally before you can even start to engage the marketplace, or even what you're going to offer. And we've seen that with companies that have kind of led the agenda over the last 10 years when it comes to being environmentally friendly and understanding their impacts. Patagonia is one that we've talked about before in terms of them understanding their impacts and what they do. And again, another, like you said, paradox when it comes to sustainability and marketing as well, as Nigel was talking about. Very much so. I think, though, the conversation has to take place from within in terms of committing the resources that's needed, the time that's needed to serve the function of marketing, as like we said, day to day, but really trying to grasp this concept that you're trying to drive long-term sustainability for the organization and not just the short-term wins. And so that needs to take place through internal kind of education, advocacy, and understanding the impacts of the organization.
It's still a tricky one though for me, and I guess I'll play devil's advocate with what we're saying here, because I know we've had these conversations for quite some time. We know how difficult this stuff is to do, kind of in practicality. I mean, it's easy to have a conversation and say, oh yeah, it's the right thing to do, and let's be more genuine and let's do this, and then people then just refer back to day job. And it's a complicated thing to do. I mean, if somebody's listening to this and they think, okay, well, I'm marketing director of company X. Yes, I'm sitting at the senior table. I want to take this concept to my organization. I can, because I'm there. I'm part of this strategic debate. Every month we get together, either virtually or face to face. I can raise this. I can put it on the agenda, and people are going to listen because of who I am. But not everybody is a marketing director, and not everybody has a seat at the table. So one of the things, collectively, I think that we need to kind of explore is, what are the tools? What is that kind of toolkit? Not of necessarily the delivery, but of the narrative that is going to get people in the organization to say, this is interesting. We do need to think about this. I've seen it in the media. I've heard it from colleagues. I've seen it from peers in other organizations. I just know it's a thing. I've seen it on social media, and there's this whole, sort of climate crisis thing going on as well. So it's probably part of that. So everybody's kind of aware this stuff is kind of going on around them. But how do you, if you're sort of junior or middle management, how do you really start to, with a limited set of tools, probably start to get people taking this properly seriously? Because if we've decided, as we've gone through this, the presentation and your early comments, if we've kind of seen that actually we're best placed because nobody else really is kind of really in charge of all the stakeholders that we have in terms of communication and driving value. But how do we do it? How do we physically do that? Because if we say, right, I want half an hour at the next board meeting, you're going to get laughed out of, out of the park. So where is that starting point? Where can we begin this journey, do you think?
I think from a personal level, certainly, I think it is down to education and understanding. So, me personally, my story, but starting off in marketing in terms of corporate and manufacturing and stuff like that, very much didn't have an understanding or grasp on sustainability. And as I transitioned to consulting, still within that corporate area, I think I began to see the impacts of management actions and has it taken place and stuff like that. And as we started the Mindful Collective, and as I educated myself on sustainability, I began to, like I said, realize the impact that companies are having, and also the position of where marketing is. In terms of personally where an individual starts, I think it's down to that level of education and understanding, so that you can begin to spot opportunities within your organization. Because I think as you learn and as you develop and as you view case studies for certain industry sectors or potential new models or new concepts you may be looking at, you begin to connect the dots for the company that you're potentially working for and spot opportunities. And those opportunities can be something that you then pitch that can then be taken to a more senior level. I won't disregard the fact that I don't think in the next 5 to 10 years, you will get laughed at the boardroom when it comes to addressing issues of sustainability. There'll be a certain level of companies who will lean into it more now from a growth perspective, but there will also be, like you said, that legislative agenda coming into place. And also, as Nigel was speaking about with ESG as well, there is a kind of rising wave of private capital that's going into sustainable development. New markets and new opportunities will open up, and those will be opportunities that boards will identify. But how you set the purpose of your organization, how you push that, like you said, narrative, that story forward of what it means for your organization, what sustainability means in your industry or in your sector, that will be the agenda that marketing needs to control and to push forward and to be in charge of educating and like I said, hopefully changing that consumer behavior as well.
And I think building on that, one of the things that we've consistently seen, and this is an interesting one for sort of people to think about. Now you can disagree with this or you can agree with this, and some of the earlier comments about being authentic and really transparent. This one might kind of be a little bit edgy, but I'm going to raise it anyway, is the whole piece about marketing sustainability is a competitive edge. Okay, so I'm just going to say I've said it. So basically being used as a differentiator, if you're in a very much a commodity marketplace, so you've got very kind of like for like businesses, products, services, brands, and everybody's kind of doing the same sort of thing. I'm thinking like, say, telecoms, for example, the pricing structures are very similar. The brands are very similar with subtle differences. It's very much a commodity space. How do you differentiate? Well, there is an argument that says sustainability is a key differentiator. And to me, that's one of the areas that potentially, and I know I can get shot down for this one because it is controversial, but that you could potentially use within the organization to say, hey, if you pay attention here, business, organization, and we get more sustainable, we're going to get competitive edge. And here's all the evidence. And then you go away and you research and you analyze and you evaluate the relevant evidence that allows you to then show that you've got a competitive edge. Now, of course, the argument against that, as I'm sure some people are thinking, is like, yeah, but hold on, that's not very authentic because that's just purely commercial. But to me, it is about a balance of commercial, because if this is seen as a high and mighty, we're sustainable, aren't we a lovely business? But you forget the commercial aspect. You forget you're still going to make profit. You forget that you're still in a really competitive marketplace with a lot of uncertainty, and you get, distracted by this whole marketing sustainability thing. Then good luck to you. You are going to really struggle. So I think for me, one of the things, building on Joe's point, is the fact that we need to kind of just be aware. We might major on competitive edge, but we need to be aware that if we get this stuff right, there's a huge value versus the competition of storytelling, of new products and development, of innovation, and particularly of things that are kind of behind the scenes, some of the supply chain relationships. Because if you're seen as a more attractive business to do business with, because other organizations have also got similar kind of sustainability goals and they're doing stuff as well, you can be the business everyone wants to do business with. So that's not even looking at your front-end customers, it's about all stakeholders. So I know it's a bit of a controversial one, and I know it's going to come up in the panel discussion because I'm going to make sure it does in the second webinar. But I think it's really important not to forget that there is a commercial thing going on here. So what I just wanted to do here, Joe, and you can sort of help me sort of talk through this one, is I just wanted to give everyone a sight of the Mindful Collective's view of the marketing mix and kind of where we're kind of working from. So Nigel's sort of mentioned this whole thing about actually putting the concept of purpose at the heart of everything that we do. This is quite a big model, so you probably aren't going to see it all in its in entirety. But if you go to mindfulcollective.net/mindful, you'll see this model in all its glory. And basically, this is a starting point for you. We always like to leave you with something that hopefully is going to allow you to kind of take your thinking forward after this and give you something to reflect on. Joe talked about creation of value. And stop me if I go slightly off piece here, Joe, with what you wanted to say here. But Joe talked about creation of value, and we see that coming through in what we might originally term product. Okay, so looking at our customer relationships, looking at innovation and co-creation of products, looking at research and analysis, so some of those trends that we talked about to create value within the organization. We then move upwards towards thinking about the stakeholders with whom we need to work to make sure that the value we've created is actually driven through to the stakeholders. Now, of course, our stakeholders will be all of the stakeholders around the organization. So who are we engaging with? Who do we want to get into conversation with? Because they might help to contribute to this thing as well. Employee engagement and obviously leadership and culture comes in there, because none of this stuff is going to happen. And we've seen this come through loud and clear in this session. None of this stuff is going to happen unless we actually engage with others in the organization, and also think about how we're going to sort of tell this narrative, how we're going to tell this story. So the leadership and culture thing, blending our storytelling in with what is acceptable within the organization. Also thinking about value delivery. So we've created it, we've worked with our stakeholders and made sure that they feel its value, and then we start to deliver it. And this then comes into our third P, our potential 4 Ps that we're talking about here, which is process. So sustainability and sustainable marketing and marketing sustainability is all wrapped up in here in terms of being efficient, being super efficient, super eco, super green, actually making sure that goes right the way through our supply chain. And we'll be talking about some examples in the next webinar of making sure we get this right. So everybody we engage with needs to be joined up in this story. It's not just about us and our business, hence why marketing is well positioned. And also having the metrics of measurement to show that our processes are ever evolving and becoming, almost like continuously improved. And this is the big one. This is the one that kind of reminded me that we really need to share this model here this morning with you, is that it's driven by value return. There's got to be a profit element to it. There's nothing wrong with making profit in this brave new world that we're entering in. You've got to make profit if you're in commercial business to still have a sustainable business. But it's about making the right profit. It's a conscious cost and revenue, doing the right kind of business with the right other businesses, making sure your revenue isn't just sales for sales' sake, that you're doing this again authentically and genuinely. So you're selling to the right people at the right time. And if your business is appropriate, that you're entering into what's called circular business, where there's a lot of kind of recycling and a lot of repurposing of the value that you've created. And there's a whole thing about subscription models and things that we'll explore next time as well. And also value-based pricing. If you get all of this right, this is hugely competitive because it talks about value-based pricing. So you're rewarded for the value that you give to all of those stakeholders in the creation that you've made and also the way that you've delivered it. So it's a really, one of my apprentices who I mentored a couple of years ago, and if you're listening to this, you know who you are, used the phrase a wholesome business. And I love that phrase. It's just been with me ever since. Businesses who operate in this way are wholesome businesses. And I just thought that says everything. You can call it what you like, but a wholesome business, this is how it's delivered. Joe, do you just want to spend just a few minutes just talking about this word in the middle here? Because this is our kind of sort of defining P, I guess you could call it, that we've got all these other Ps around the outside, and Nigel talked about 7+ Ps and others are being added in here. But for us, there's a sort of a guiding light here, and it's this P in the middle, this purpose piece.
Yeah, I think it's, as you're talking about your slightly contentious sustainability driving competitive advantage. I think, that's what we're talking about in the next webinar in terms of how to avoid greenwashing. Thinking about sustainability and competitive advantage, without purpose at the center of your decision makings, I think that's where sustainability can go, or intentions into sustainability can go a bit right. That's where you're thinking about how this can drive competitive advantage, as opposed to the value of the profit you generate is contributing to the overall purpose of the organization. And purpose can have two kind of hats within the organization. There's the overall kind of meta purpose, where you're focusing on long-term well-being for everyone, but there's also the personal purpose of the organization, the organizational purpose, the story you're trying to tell. And so when Nigel talks about changing consumer behavior and educating consumers to make better choices, and that having a reflection on the products and the services you provide, how you treat your staff, the processes within the organization, how you redistribute profit within the organization, all of that needs to be aligned to a higher purpose. And there's a lot of research that's been put forward with this. There's actually two working papers coming out from, or that have just been released from Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership that are looking at putting purpose into practice and how that drives sustainability outcomes. And there's a lot of work with purpose in also at a governance level as well, with ISO accreditation, which I think a lot of companies are going to adopt and bring into place. And so when we look at sustainability and we look at driving sustainable outcomes, purpose really sits at the core of decision making, and it should have an impact on every sector and every area of the business. But in terms of ownership of the narrative and communicating that purpose both internally and externally, that's where we see obviously marketing is very influential on organizational purpose and telling these stories that will hopefully drive behavioral change both internally and externally within the organization. And so whilst we spoke about sustainability can lead to competitive advantage, if it's done without purpose at the helm of it, I think it can often go a little bit too far into consumerism and to materialistic kind of ends when it comes to competitive advantage or kind of just driving more product sales.
So that is just touching on the tip of the iceberg of more contentious debates that we're going to see in the panel session next week. I have absolutely no doubt. But thank you very much, Joe, for sort of your wisdom and explaining some of the sort of the deeper concepts within this whole marketing sustainability piece here today. And really, because obviously the limitations of time, there's only so much that we're able to actually sort of share with you, obviously within a single session, which hopefully then has whetted your appetite for the upcoming sessions. So the next session on the 14th is how to avoid greenwashing. So if you decide that you want to take the next steps within the organization and start to introduce some of these concepts, we're going to help you to understand some of the ways that you won't then fall into the hole of greenwashing, because as soon as you start doing this stuff, there is that danger, there is that risk. So we're going to share with you how not to do it and how to avoid it. And then on the 21st, as I say, we're going to be looking to draw lots of these concepts together and help you to build a sustainable brand. In the meantime, one of the things I really would encourage you to do is to go and visit the Mindful Collective. If that new business model, the new marketing mix with purpose at the core was something that you feel would be worth you exploring a little bit more, we've got some tutorials on there. We've got some guidance notes on the Mindful Collective website, so that's mindfulcollective.net. So I'd encourage you to go along over there and have a little explore. And as I say, if you are part of this journey already within your organization, we'd love you to share some case studies and examples there. This is very much the essence of the Mindful Collective. It is very much a community. It's not about us telling you how to do it. It's just about us giving you a platform to share the really good stuff that you're doing. So the next session you can book onto, which is marketingcollege.com/events. But in the meantime, thank you very much to Nigel for the presentation, for Joe for his wisdom, for Lauren for hosting this. I'm Neil Wilkins. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this introductory session here today, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you at noon on the 14th for the very next session in this series. So thank you for coming along today, and we'll see you again very, very soon.